The lemon-scented ammonia stung my nostrils, a clean smell fighting a losing battle against something metallic and old. I scrubbed at the grout between the marble tiles, my knuckles raw inside the thin rubber gloves. It was my third pass on the same spot in the grand foyer, a faint, rust-colored stain that refused to lift. In a house this silent, this empty, a single imperfection felt like a scream. The rule was simple: be invisible. I came after the owner, Mr. Moretti, left. I was gone before he returned. For 6 months, I had cleaned his sprawling penthouse, a ghost in a light blue uniform, and had never once laid eyes on him. The money was more than I could make anywhere else, enough to keep my mother in the nursing home with the good windows. All I had to do was erase every trace of life, every speck of dust, every fingerprint, and then vanish myself. However, today the silence was different. It was not empty. It was heavy. I felt it before I saw him, a shift in the air, a drop in the temperature. I looked up from the floor, and my breath caught. He was standing in the archway to the main living area, watching me. Dante Moretti was not a large man, but he took up all the space in the room. He was carved from shadows and stillness, dressed in a black suit so perfectly tailored it seemed a part of him. His dark hair was cut short, severe. His face was all sharp angles and unforgiving lines, his eyes the color of old, deep water. He held a glass of amber liquid, but he was not drinking. He was just watching me on my hands and knees, my white apron smudged with grime. The curiosity gap was no longer about the house. It was about the man who owned it. And now, I was locked in the room with him, and I could not leave. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. I pushed myself to my feet, my knees aching. I kept my eyes down, fixed on the scuffed toes of my sneakers. Mr. Moretti.
I'm sorry.
I was told you wouldn't be here until this evening. His voice, when it came, was lower than I expected.
Smoother.
Like stones rolling in a deep river. The schedule changed. He said nothing else. The silence stretched, thin and sharp. I could feel his gaze on me, analytical and cold. It was not the way a man looks at a woman. It was the way a man looks at a piece on a chessboard he does not recognize. I smoothed my apron, my hands trembling slightly. I can come back later. I just need to finish the study. Finish, he said. It was not a suggestion. It was a command. He moved past me, the scent of expensive cologne and something else, something like cedar and cold night air, trailing in his wake. He did not look at me again, but I felt his presence in every corner of the vast, sterile space. He settled into a leather armchair in the living room, the one that faced the wall of windows overlooking the park and the city below. I gathered my bucket and supplies, my movements stiff and awkward. The study was my last room. It was masculine and imposing, lined with dark wood shelves filled with books that looked as if they had never been opened. A massive mahogany desk dominated the center, its surface clear except for a single, gleaming silver letter opener. My job was to dust, polish, and empty the small wastebasket, to leave no trace. I worked quickly, my senses on high alert. The quiet hum of the building's ventilation system was the only sound, but it felt like I could hear the slow beat of his heart from the other room. I ran my dust cloth over the spines of the books, the heavy desk, the leather chairs. As I knelt to polish the desk's thick, carved legs, my cloth snagged on something. I peered under the heavy piece of furniture, into the deep shadows near the wall. Something small glinted there, wedged against the baseboard. I reached for it, my fingers closing around cool, heavy metal. I pulled it into the light. It was a cufflink. It was silver, intricately carved into the shape of a soaring eagle, its eye a tiny chip of sapphire. It was ornate, almost gaudy, and it was not his. I knew, with absolute certainty, that it did not belong to Dante Moretti. I had cleaned his bedroom, his walk-in closet. I had polished his valet stand where his accessories were laid out with surgical precision. His cufflinks were gold or onyx. Simple, severe, and lethally understated. This was not his. A cold dread washed over me. This was a trace. A piece of someone else left behind in the most private room of a man who valued control above all else. My first instinct was to leave it, to pretend I had never seen it. But what if he found it? What if he thought I had missed it, that I was careless? In this house, carelessness felt like a sin that would not be forgiven. I heard the subtle shift of leather from the other room. He was moving. My heart leaped into my throat. Without thinking, without deciding, my fingers curled around the cufflink and I shoved it deep into the pocket of my apron. I stood up just as he appeared in the doorway of the study. His eyes swept the room, missing nothing. They landed on me, and for a terrifying second, I was sure he could see the weight of the silver secret in my pocket. He knew. He had to know. "Are you finished, Clara?" He said my name. I had not realized he even knew it. It sounded different in his mouth. Not a name, but a label. A possession. "Yes, Mr. Moretti. Just finished." My voice was a thin whisper. "Good." He stepped aside, a silent dismissal. I gathered my things, my body rigid, my gaze fixed on the floor. I walked past him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. I did not dare to look up. I did not dare to breathe until the heavy front door clicked shut behind me, the sound of a vault sealing me out, or sealing him in. The silver cufflink felt like a block of ice against my thigh all the way home. I told myself to throw it away, toss it in a sewer grate, drop it in the river, forget I ever saw it. It was not my business. I was the cleaner. My job was to make things disappear, not to collect dangerous souvenirs. But I could not do it. Some instinct, primal and insistent, told me that the piece of metal in my pocket was more than just a lost item. It was a question, and I was afraid I already knew the answer would be steeped in violence. A few days later, my fear was given a name. I was in the service hallway, polishing the chrome fixtures of a small bar area, when I heard voices from the living room. Low and tense. Dante's voice, unmistakable. And another, rougher voice I recognized as Marco, his second in command, a man whose polite smiles never reached his eyes. "It was a clean operation," Marco was saying. "No one saw anything. They knew the route." Dante's voice was dangerously soft. "They knew the time. That information did not come from the outside. It came from this table." A chair scraped against the floor. "Are you accusing me, Dante?" "I am stating a fact. There is a leak. And I will find the source. I will tear them apart, piece by piece, until they beg me to stop. You know what I do to traitors, Marco. You know the price of betrayal in this family." Family. He said the word like a prayer and a death sentence all at once. I froze, my hand hovering over a water spot on the counter. I was not supposed to hear this. This was a conversation that could get a person erased. I held my breath, praying they would not notice the cleaner who was still in the house. The cufflink in my locker downstairs suddenly felt like it was burning a hole through the metal door. I thought I was just a girl who cleaned a rich man's house. A house owned by a man who was probably some kind of powerful, ruthless businessman. But the word family, spoken with such cold venom, changed everything. This was not business. This was something else entirely. And I was holding a secret that could identify a traitor at his table. A secret that could get me killed. I could not put it back. I could not throw it away. I was trapped, not by walls or locked doors, but by a small, silver eagle that now felt heavier than the entire city. The days that followed were thick with a new kind of tension. The penthouse, once serenely empty, was now often occupied. Men in dark suits came and went at odd hours, their faces grim, their conversations held in hushed tones that stopped the moment I entered a room. Dante was a constant, brooding presence.
He no longer ignored me.
He watched me. His dark eyes would follow me as I polished floors and dusted shelves. He seemed to be looking for something, a flicker of fear, a sign of deceit. I kept my head down, my expression neutral, my movements efficient and small. I was the cleaner. I was invisible. I repeated it to myself like a mantra, even as a stare made the hairs on my arms stand up. I felt seen in a way that was more unnerving than any threat. He was testing me. One afternoon, he called me into the study. He was sitting behind his desk, a file open before him. He gestured to a silver tray on the corner of the desk. "This needs to be polished." My eyes flickered to the tray, then to his hands. He was wearing cufflinks. Simple, gold squares.
No eagles. No sapphires.
My heart beat a slow, heavy rhythm. I picked up the tray and my polishing cloth, my hands steady through sheer force of will. "You're quiet," he observed, his eyes never leaving my face. "Do you live alone, Clara?" The question was a blade, sliding between my ribs. It was too personal. "I have an apartment in Queens. With family? My mother is in a facility. Uptown." I did not offer more. He leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning softly. "She must be proud of you. Such a hard worker." It was a trap. Every word was a carefully laid snare. I focused on the tarnished silver in my hands, rubbing a small circle over and over. "I do my job, Mr. Moretti."
Yes.
"You do." He let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. "You can go." I left, the unasked questions screaming in the space between us. He was paranoid, trusting no one, and I was one of the few people allowed to move through his private spaces. The cufflink in my possession was no longer just a secret. It was a potential death sentence. One evening, I was held late. A wine glass had been shattered in the dining room, and I was told to stay and ensure every shard was removed from the thick fibers of the Persian rug. It was after 10 when I finished, and the penthouse was submerged in its usual tomb-like quiet. As I walked my cart down the long, marble hallway toward the service elevator, I passed a door I had always been instructed to ignore. It was at the far end of the private wing, a simple white door with no markings. Tonight, a thin line of light shone from beneath it. I heard a muffled crash, the distinct sound of glass breaking. I froze. I should have kept walking. I should have gone to the elevator and pretended I heard nothing. It was not my business. But I hesitated. A moment later, the door was pulled open and Dante stood there. His face was a mask of cold fury, but his eyes held something else. Something raw and broken. His right hand was bleeding freely, a deep gash across his knuckles dripping crimson onto the pristine white floor. We stared at each other. Before I could think, I abandoned my cart, grabbed a clean, dry cloth from my apron, and stepped toward him. "You're bleeding." I reached for his hand. He flinched, a barely perceptible tightening of his shoulders, but he did not pull away. I gently wrapped the cloth around his knuckles, applying pressure. The fabric immediately began to soak through with red. His skin was warm. The silence was absolute. Over his shoulder, through the open doorway, I saw the room. It was not an office or a guest suite. It was a girl's bedroom. It was frozen in time, with pale pink walls, a canopy bed, and stuffed animals arranged on a window seat. On the floor was a shattered picture frame, the source of the noise and his injury. He saw where I was looking. His entire posture changed, the vulnerability vanishing as if it had never been there. A wall of ice slammed down behind his eyes.
"Get out," he said.
The words were quiet, but they carried the force of a physical blow. His voice was rough, fractured. I dropped my hand from his, the blood-soaked cloth falling to the floor between us. I backed away, my heart pounding. I turned and fled, not stopping until I was safely inside the service elevator, the metal doors closing on the image of his bleeding hand and the ghost of a girl's bedroom. That was the first time I saw the wound he carried, the one that had nothing to do with cut glass. The next morning, my supervisor called. Mrs. Gable was a stern woman who never wasted words. "There's been a change," she said. "We have another placement for you. A nice family on the Upper East Side. Less complicated." It was an exit, a clean break, a chance to walk away from the silent penthouse, the watchful man, and the silver cufflink that weighed me down. I could go back to a normal life, to cleaning normal houses where the worst stain was spilled juice, not secrets and blood. I should have said yes. I should have thanked her and run. But I thought of the look in his eyes when he stood in that doorway. The flash of raw pain before it was buried under layers of cold control. I thought of the name Marco had said with such reverence. Family. And I thought of the eagle cufflink. It was a piece of a puzzle, and walking away felt like leaving a bomb untimed. No, I said, my voice surprising me with its firmness. Thank you, Mrs. Gable, but I'm fine where I am.
I chose to stay.
Therefore, everything changed. By refusing to run when given the chance, I had unknowingly passed a test. I was no longer just the cleaner. I was something else. Something he was not yet sure what to do with. The following day, Dante found me in the kitchen. He did not speak at first, simply stood in the doorway, watching me wipe down the stainless steel counters. The room at the end of the hall, he said finally, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. It needs to be cleaned. From now on, you will be the only one to enter it. I looked at him, my cloth stilled in my hand. He was giving me access to his most private sorrow. It was not a reward. It was a burden, a test of absolute, terrifying trust. Yes, Mr. Moretti. Cleaning Sophia's room was like tending to a shrine. Everything was exactly as a teenage girl would have left it. A book lay open on the nightstand, a ribbon marking the page. A soft sweater was draped over the back of a chair. My job was to dust without disturbing a single object, to vacuum without moving the rug a single inch. It was a room preserved in amber, thick with the silence of grief. While dusting the shelves of her desk, my fingers brushed against a leather-bound journal. I knew I should not touch it, but I did. I opened it to a random page. Her handwriting was a looping, youthful scrawl. I did not read the words. My eyes caught on a photograph tucked between the pages. It was a picture of a smiling, dark-haired girl, Sophia, I presumed, with her arm linked through someone else's. It was Marco. They were younger, standing on a beach somewhere, looking carefree and happy in a way I could not imagine Marco ever looking. They looked like they were in love. I closed the diary, my blood running cold. Marco, the man Dante suspected of betrayal, had been close to his sister. The sister whose memory Dante guarded with such ferocity. I slid the diary back into its place, my mind reeling. Later that day, Dante summoned me to the study again. Did you find anything in the room? He asked, his gaze sharp enough to peel my skin. Anything out of place? This was my chance. I could tell him about the photo. I could tell him about Marco and Sophia. But some instinct held me back. It felt like a betrayal of the girl in the photograph, of the ghost in the pristine room. It felt wrong. The story was more complicated than a simple traitor at the table. No, Mr. Moretti. I lied, my voice even. Everything was in its place. The lie sat like a stone in my stomach. I had just crossed a line. I had chosen a side, though I was not even sure what the sides were. The city's simmering violence finally boiled over. A rival family, the Falcones, must have sensed the weakness, the internal division within the Moretti organization. They made their move. It was not a direct attack on Dante. It was a message. I was walking home from the subway, just a few blocks from my apartment, when a black sedan screeched to a halt beside me. Before I could react, a man was in front of me, grabbing my arm. He was not trying to hurt me. He was delivering a warning. Tell your boss, he hissed, his breath smelling of stale coffee, that Dante Moretti's territory isn't as secure as he thinks. He can't even protect his cleaning girl. He shoved me back and the car sped off, leaving me trembling on the sidewalk. They knew who I was.
They knew where I lived.
My anonymity was gone. I was no longer invisible. I was a target. When I got to the penthouse the next day, Dante was waiting for me just inside the service entrance. 2 of his men stood behind him. He did not ask what happened. He knew. His face was granite. You will not be going home, he stated. You will stay here. In the north guest room. Your things will be collected.
It was not a request.
I was a prisoner in his gilded cage. He was doing this for my protection, but it felt like ownership. He led me to a guest suite that was larger than my entire apartment. He closed the door and I was alone. Sleep was impossible. The silence of the penthouse pressed in on me. After hours of staring at the ceiling, I slipped out of the room. I found him in the library, staring out the massive window at the city lights. He was holding the same glass of amber liquid as the first day I saw him, but this time, he looked tired. The control was still there, but there were cracks in the facade. I must have made a sound because he turned. His eyes found me in the dim light. He did not seem surprised to see me. On a small side table near the door was a simple glass vase holding a small bouquet of white daisies. Tony, the elderly day-shift doorman in my building, had given them to me that morning. For the pretty girl who always says hello, he'd said, his old eyes twinkling. I had brought them with me, a small, stupid piece of my old life. Dante's gaze fell upon the flowers. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He walked over to the table, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked at the daisies as if they were a coiled snake. "Who got you those flowers?" His voice was a low growl, stripped of all its smoothness. It was raw and dangerous.
"The doorman."
"At my building." He reached out and his fingers brushed against one of the petals, a surprisingly gentle touch that contrasted with the violence simmering in his eyes. "He will not be doing that again." He turned to face me, closing the distance between us until I was backed against the wall of books. He placed a hand on the wall next to my head, caging me in. His scent, cedar and cold air, filled my senses. "Do you understand me, Clara?" he whispered, his face inches from mine. The jealousy rolling off him was a palpable force, a dark, possessive heat. "No one touches what is mine. No one looks at what is mine. You are under my protection. That means you are mine." It was not a confession of affection. It was a claim, a brand. Part of me, the sane part, was screaming in terror. This was a dangerous man, a killer, claiming me as a possession. But another part of me, a part one did not recognize, felt a strange, terrifying sense of relief. For the first time since that car screeched to a halt on my street, I felt safe. And that realization was more frightening than any threat he could make. I was no longer just a cleaner caught in the crossfire. I was becoming a willing resident of his dark, violent world. The air in the library was thick with his claim. I did not move. I did not speak. I simply met his gaze, my heart hammering a frantic, unsteady rhythm against my ribs. He held my stare for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine for something.
Fear.
Defiance. He found something else, something I could not name myself, and a flicker of confusion crossed his features before the mask of control slammed back into place. He pushed away from the wall, the sudden space between us feeling like a chasm. "Go to your room," he ordered, his voice once again flat and commanding. He turned his back on me, dismissing me. I did not go. "It was Marco," I said to his back. The words came out quiet but clear in the silent room. "The cufflink. It belongs to Marco." He went still. He did not turn around, but I saw his shoulders tense. "What did you say?" I reached into the pocket of a simple dress I now wore in place of my uniform and pulled out the small, silver eagle. I placed it on the table next to the daisies. It looked obscene next to their simple innocence. "I found this. In here. The day you came home early." Slowly he turned. His eyes dropped to the cufflink, then lifted to my face. The look in them was lethal. "You have had this for weeks. You lied to me." "Yes."
"Why?"
The single word was laced with ice. "Because he wasn't the traitor," I said, the pieces clicking together in my mind, fueled by the memory of a photograph and the raw jealousy of a man who understood possession. "He was in love with your sister. He would never betray you, because it would be betraying her memory. Someone is setting him up. Someone who knew they were close. Someone who knew you would see that closeness as a motive for betrayal." Dante stared at the cufflink, then at me. For a moment, I thought he was going to kill me right there. I had lied. I had kept a secret. In his world, those were capital offenses. The library doors burst open. It was Gallo, one of Dante's senior capos, a man with a politician's smile and cold, reptilian eyes. Two of his men flanked him, guns drawn. Gallo's smile was gone. His face was a mask of triumphant rage. "It's a shame, Dante," Gallo said, his own gun leveled at Dante's chest. "You were so busy looking for the rat, you never saw the snake." Dante did not look surprised. He looked weary. He had known. My words had only confirmed it. His eyes flickered to me, a silent, furious command.
Run.
But Gallo had seen the flicker. His eyes landed on me. Ah, the little cleaner. The new pet. She'll make a good shield. He moved toward me. Dante took a step forward. Gallo.
Don't.
Gallo laughed. You always had a weakness for strays, Dante. Just like with Sophia. You protect them and they get you killed. He lunged for me, grabbing my arm in a brutal grip. Dante was frozen. I could see it in his eyes. The past was happening all over again. The girl he was supposed to protect, about to die because of him. He was paralyzed by his own history. I was not. I did not scream. I did not struggle. I acted. My free hand shot out, grabbing a heavy crystal vase from a nearby shelf. It was not the one with the daisies. It was a solid, weighted thing. With all my strength, I swung it, smashing it against the side of Gallo's head. The crack of crystal against bone echoed in the suddenly silent room. Gallo grunted, his grip on my arm loosening as he staggered back, stunned. It was the only opening Dante needed. The violence was swift, economical, and terrifyingly precise. He moved like a shadow, a blur of deadly motion. In the space of 2 heartbeats, Gallo's men were on the floor, and Gallo himself was on his knees, Dante's gun pressed to his temple. The lethal certainty was back in his eyes. He was no longer the grieving brother. He was the boss, the predator. He pulled the trigger without hesitation. The aftermath was silent and still. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy in the air, a bitter perfume. Dante did not look at the body on his expensive rug.
He looked at me.
I was standing amidst the wreckage, my chest heaving, my hand still clutching the broken neck of the vase. I had not waited to be rescued. I had made a choice. He walked over to me, his steps measured. He gently took the broken glass from my hand and tossed it aside. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, where my skin was scraped raw. He looked at my face, his expression unreadable. Sophia would have liked you, he said, his voice quiet. She was a fighter, too. It was the closest he could come to saying thank you. It was more than enough. He told me then, in the quiet of the library with death at our feet, how she had died. A car bomb meant for him. A price paid for his name, his life. A debt he could never repay. The cost of that night was high. Gallo's betrayal sent ripples through the family. Loyalties were tested, alliances strained. Marco was cleared, his name restored, but the knowledge of what Dante had suspected him of left a chasm between them. The family was secure again, but it was a victory that felt like a wound. Weeks passed. A new, strange, normal settled over the penthouse. I was no longer the cleaner. I was something else. I had a room. I had his protection. I had the unspoken weight of his claim. I was no longer invisible. I was a fixture in his world, a quiet presence in the eye of the storm. One evening, I stood on the vast terrace. The city lights a galaxy of possibilities at my feet. A world away from my small apartment in Queens, a lifetime away from the girl who just wanted to pay her mother's bills. The air was cool, carrying the distant sounds of sirens and life. I heard him approach, his footsteps silent on the stone. He came to stand behind me, not touching, but so close I could feel his warmth against my back. He was a solid wall, a shield against the world. He said nothing. He simply stood with me, sharing the silence. He placed something on the stone railing next to my hand. I looked down. It was a single, perfect white gardenia, its petals like velvet in the twilight. A flower that symbolized a secret, unspoken devotion. A warrior's flower. He did not offer words of love or promises of a future. Those were things for a different world, for different people. In his world, loyalty was shown, not spoken. Debts were paid. Protection was absolute. And a claim, once made, was forever. I did not look at him. I kept my eyes on the sprawling city below. But my hand moved, my fingers gently covering the perfect, fragile bloom.
It was a choice.
My choice.
To stay.
To accept the darkness and the danger, the silence and the storm. To be his. My eyes were wide open, and I was not afraid.